The Netherlands is a very forward-thinking place with very progressive policies. The country boasts a powerful social security system, extensive health care for all of its citizens, and robust pensions for retirees. Still, why the Netherlands is the most unequal in the world based on the Gini coefficient? Hey folks, welcome back to Country Economies Explained. In this video, we are going to find out why Dutch is the most unequal country in the world, and let us dive in. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing videos. And let's begin. However, it is a nation with relatively high tax rates, which protects its workers to the point where it is difficult, if not impossible, to fire them. It's kind of like a progressive version of paradise, right? If only it didn't keep a teeny tiny little secret, then it would be perfect. This little nation that seems like it belongs on a postcard is, according to the World Bank, the most unequal place on the entire planet. The nation in question is located in a region of the world that is very remote from either Africa or South America, which is somewhat surprising given that inequality is at its worst in those two regions. So what exactly is it, and why is it the world's most unequal nation? For decades, politicians in nations like the US have supported laws similar to those that have been customary in the Netherlands for decades, as a method to control the issue of wealth inequality. However, if we look at the results, it doesn't look like they'll do that at all. So how did the Netherlands, of all places, come to be known as the home of inequality? Inequality is a weird thing to observe. There are a lot of different techniques to measure inequality. But regardless of the numbers, there is no denying that this is a controversial subject. There is no way around it. Inequality is something that is commonly associated with developing nations. Yet in the last 20 years, we have unfortunately seen an increase in inequality in developed nations as a result of macroeconomic policies implemented by central banks. The issue of inequality is a concern for decision makers, yet as politicians and central bankers attempt to totally control the economy, the subject of inequality tends to be exploited as a political weapon more than as an accurate topic of macroeconomic serious discussion. What can be observed based on the Gini coefficient? Imagine for a moment that there are only 3 persons in an economy and that each person has an annual income of $3. In a perfectly even system, every one of these players would walk away with $1 in their pockets. $1 represents a person's whole annual income. The sum of $1 for the second person and $1 for the first person is $2. The income of the third person added to the income of the second person and the income of the first person totals $3. A simple graph reveals a perfect x equals y relation between the two variables. In this utopian world where everyone is treated equally, the Gini coefficient would be 0. That means there would be no difference in the amount of money earned by anyone. Another possibility is that the opposite is true. Only one individual would benefit from the expenditure of $3. Therefore, it indicates that the Gini coefficient would be equal to 1. In addition to this, it would also imply that the system could not be any less equitable or efficient. The Gini coefficient for all countries is consistently located between 1.0 and 0. These coefficients can be used to measure two different things: wealth inequality and income inequality. These coefficients can be used to measure two different things: wealth inequality and income inequality. On social media, we constantly read about and observe the inequality of wealth that exists between a worker with a middle-class salary and the CEO of a well-known corporation. If CEOs make billions of dollars, then they have the ability to save more and accumulate greater wealth in comparison to workers in the middle class. However, there are several nations, particularly in the northern regions of Europe, that have rather robust social policies, which are in turn funded by fairly high levels of taxation. Because of this, when we look at the records kept by the World Bank on income inequality, all of these countries score relatively low. Even though we might be able to draw a correlation between income inequality and wealth inequality, the fact remains that the countries of Northern Europe rank among the highest in terms of wealth inequality. These Northern European nations have a greater wealth gap than countries such as the USA, Brazil, or India. And why is that? Households in Northern European countries are encouraged to loan up to and over 100% of the price of the house as a mortgage. If the borrowers are unable to pay their mortgage and the bank is unable to collect back the money from repossessing the home, the bank can simply get a check from the government for the difference. This presents the bank with an opportunity to make risk-free loans. Because of this, it can be deduced that a sizable portion of the population lives in homes that are submerged in water, which is not a problem in any way. In other words, the households in the Northern European countries, despite having a high debt burden, are all able to live extremely comfortable lifestyles within the context of this macroeconomic system. Stock markets, limited liability firms, and other speculative investments were all firsts in modern history and were introduced by the Dutch in the 1600s. They were the ones who pioneered the practice of treating economics like a game. During the past 400 years, big earthquakes have not occurred in the Netherlands, which has allowed the country to continue its cycle of repeatedly passing on inheritances from one generation to the next. This is because of a phenomenon that may be unprecedented everywhere else in the world. The term old money refers to the currency used in the Netherlands. The richest persons in the Netherlands are not quite as wealthy as their counterparts in other countries, such as the US, China, or Russia. The heiress of the famous beer company Heineken is the richest person in the Netherlands. Although neither she nor her father, his father, or even his great-grandpa founded the business, neither did his father. This fortune is so old that no one in the family has made an income since Napoleon was a youngster. Because of the compounding effect of money, this fortune was enormous. Nevertheless, after a few generations, it would swiftly disappear. The Dutch, on the other hand, managed to keep it under control by appointing only one child to be educated on how to maintain the family riches as secretive and secure as possible. As long as the fortune continues to grow, the remainder of the family will be able to maintain a standard of living that is satisfactory. At last, what can we conclude? Things tend to be less centralized and more decentralized in nations where there is no such thing as a dynastic inheritance. One generation will acquire fortunes, but the ensuing generations will be responsible for dividing those fortunes up among themselves. However, if high finance is out of reach for every person on the planet, we will perpetually experience cycles of enrichment for a select few, while the majority of people are left behind. Of course, no one wants to be in the lowest 10% of the Netherlands, rather than the bottom 10% of countries like Ethiopia, which is significantly more equal according to the Gini coefficient. In reality, the majority of individuals would prefer to be in the worst 10% of the Netherlands, rather than the top 10% of Ethiopia. It suggests that ecosystems that provide universal well-being for the majority of a country's population, such as free education and healthcare, are considerably more balanced than statistical data, which becomes blind if not contextualized in its essence. And any nation's essence has less to do with its equality levels than it does with its levels of security, prosperity, access to credit, and access to healthcare, education, and medical treatment. If these pillars do not exist or are difficult to establish for any country in the world, the social compact would never work. A healthy society lacks difficulties at the very top of the pyramid. The fall of the middle class and the neglect of the weakest sections of society are the roots of the issue. A nation that doesn't protect its social standing will eventually breach the social agreement between all facets of society and fall. The threat posed by policymakers forgetting the cornerstones of the welfare state is what the Dutch example demonstrates, not the danger of wealth inequality. And that brings us to the end of the video. Feel free to let us know what you think about this video. And if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for all things. Thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you in the next one.